All right, the second problem is the football team class. And this is a very nice exercise for people who are still struggling with the concepts of how to build a class and how to build objects out of it. So this is a very nice review of this. And one other thing that I would like to point out is that you should start thinking about, like, how can I build a class from scratch? Notice here that the exercises so far are very nice. They give you the structure, what kind of fields we have, what are the methods that we need to construct. But later on, as you gain experience, you need to start to think about, like, okay, as a programmer, how can I build a class from scratch? How can I think about what fields do I need? What methods do I need to implement? And this is something you will gain as you practice more and gain more experience. So for now, let's just use this nice example, which is guiding us to how build this class. So the first thing we are told is that we would like to define a class that is called football team, and football team class is going to represent a football team. And then we are told that there are what are the properties and what are the fields, methods, and so on. So let's start by building the football team class here. So here I'm going to build this new file. Here is the editor. And the first thing we would like to work on is the instance variables. And we are given that there are 3 fields in this class. These 3 fields are the name of the team, number of wins, and number of losses. Now, the rest of this statement is very important. It says that these 3 fields cannot be accessed outside of the class. What does that mean? It means that outside of the class, if you have another class, a main method, anything outside that would like to access these fields, it cannot access this directly. So this means we have to set them to be private. Now, if we set them to be private, we are protecting them, and the only access that you have is through the methods that you will define later on for this class. So private fields cannot be accessed except from within the class itself. So the first one is the name of the team. So this is going to be a string. So it's private. First thing is going to be a string, and it's going to be, for example, let's say team name. Then we have number of wins, number of losses. Both are numbers. They are integers, so they are going to be private and let's call it team wins. And the other is going to be private and team losses. All right, so we are done with the instance variables, or what we call the fields of this class. The next thing we would like to do is to write a constructor that accepts the name of the team, the number of wins, and the number of losses as arguments, and sets the class properties to those values. Remember here, I'm going to review these concepts with you. Constructor is the special method that will help you construct objects out of this class. So now we are building the template of the football teams. Whenever we would like to create a new football team, we are going to use the constructor to do this. It's going to help us construct that new team object. So here in general, whenever you create a constructor, the objective is to simplify the process of building this new team. All right. So for any new team, you would like to define, for example, let's say at the beginning of the season, what are their name, what is the name of the team, and what are the wins and the losses. And let's say, for example, initially it's supposed to be 0. So name of the team, 0 wins, 0 losses. So what it's going to do is going to create that object, and it's going to set these fields to these values that you just passed as an input to that constructor. So here, this is our constructor, and it's not no parameter, it's actually a parameter constructor. So we are just going to say this is a constructor for objects of the class football team. And this constructor is going to take 3 useful information from me, which are the name of the team. So I'm going to say it takes a string as an input, all right, which I'm going to call, for example, name. All right, then it's going to take another variable, which is integer, and I'm going to call it the wins. Then I'm going to another variable, which is going to be losses. So something like this. Now, if you provide these values to the constructor is supposed to go and build that new object of the team, and it's going to assign the name to that team name, the wins to the team wins, and the losses to the team losses. So here to do this, we're going to say the team name is equal to the name, which is the input of this method or constructor. The team wins is going to be equal to wins. The team losses is going to be equal to losses. Now, one thing I would like to point out, and this is a common mistake that I have been seeing for a while now, in both labs and quizzes, is that people go here in the constructor and try to say, okay, that's a string, so I'm going to define it as a string. And that's an integer, so it's going to be an integer, and so on. That is going to cause problems. What you are doing is that you are defining new local variables, variables that are owned by the football team constructor, that has the same name as your fields of the class. This is going to create a problem, and if you remember, we said this is going to do create the effect of shadowing in this case. So you always try here. I don't have to define this as a string because I already know that it's a string. How do I know this? Because this method or constructor inside this class has access to the fields of this class. So here I don't need to define this as an integer. I have already defined this variable or this field. So these are predefined fields. These are local variables owned by the football team constructor. So now we are done with the first part here. The next step is to write methods that return the name of the team, the number of the wins, and the number of losses. So here from this description, it seems to me that these are the getters. We are trying to get the name of the team, the name of the number of wins, and the number of losses. So here I'm going to define a set of getter methods. All right, and I'm going to ignore the description of methods from now on just to keep it simple. So if I would like to return the name of the team, so this is going to be a public method. It's going to return a string, and this method is not going to take any input. How do I know this? Because it's not going to take an input. I'm just asking it to return a string to me. So this means it doesn't really need any input in that case. And I'm going to make it called getName. So that's getName method, and what it's going to do is that it's going to return the field associated with the name of the team, which is called team name. All right, so that is the first getter to get the name. Then I'm going to define public. It's going to return an integer. It's called getWins, and this is going to return the team wins. And the last one is going to be the getLosses, and it will be very similar to this. So here it's going to return an integer, losses, and team losses. Perfect. So now we have our getters, we have our constructor, and we have our three fields. The next step is to write a method to increase the numbers of wins by 1, and another method to increase the number of losses by 1. All right, so here in this case, I am going to, did we miss something? Write methods that return the name. Okay, write method increase. Okay, accept the name. Okay, all right, so we have the methods that return, so we are done with this one. Okay. And here, next write a method to increase the number. Okay, so we are going to increase the number of wins and the number of the losses, right? So in this case, I'm going to, let's say, build a new method here that I'm going to make it public. All right. And because we don't have any restrictions in this, it doesn't say whether it has to be accessed within the class or outside the class. So I'm going to make it public, and I'm going to define this as not returning anything. It's not returning anything. I'm just going to set this number of wins to number of wins plus 1, and here void, and I'm going to call it increment wins. All right, and it's not going to take any input because the increment is going to be done by one step. So in this case, I don't really have to provide an input, and I'm not going to increment by 3 or 4, right? So if it's a variable integer, then I will have to include it here. Otherwise, since this is systematic increase by 1, so we do not need to pass any input in this case. So here I'm going to set the team wins, right, to be team wins plus equal 1. All right, so this means take team wins, increase it by 1, then assign it to team wins, right? And here, do not forget the semicolon for this. The second one is to increase the number of losses by 1. All right, so it will be very similar to this one. It's not going to take any input. It's not going to return anything. It's just going to set the team losses to increment by 1. All right, so here we are going to inc losses in this case. All right, great. So now we are left with team here methods that return, the methods to increase, and then the write a method that returns true when a team has a good record, meaning the team has more wins than losses. So this is going to be a method that is going to return true or false, and here the question is whether the team is in good standing. Does it have a good record? All right. So here the condition for a good record is very simple: if the number of wins is greater than the number of losses. All right, so since here there is a condition saying whether, or meaning that the team has more wins than the losses, then we need to ask this question: does the team has more wins than losses? And this means we are going to ask a conditional, or we have a condition statement which says if the number of wins is greater than the number of losses, return true. So here I'm going to say that this is going to be a public method, and it's going to return Boolean because it's going to return true or false. And I'm going to call it has good record. All right, so that's the name of the method, and it checks whether the team has a good has a good record or not. So what will happen in this method is that we are going to ask the question is if team wins, the field, is greater than team losses. All right, because that was the condition. It says here good record means the team has more wins than losses. All right, so if this is true, what we want to do is to return true. Right? Now here there is something very important, is that if I try to run this, it's going to give me an error. And why is that? It says missing return statement. But we already have a return statement here. So why does it do that? Now, one thing that you need to consider here is that Java is considering the possibility that this is not going to be satisfied. In other words, what happens if you have team wins equal or less than team losses? Here, I missed this. So again, what happens if team wins is less than or equal to team losses? In this case, this is not going to be executed, and this whole method will be as if there is no return. And that's why it's telling you that there is no return statement. You see the problem? So here we need to fix this by considering the other scenario, which is else, and then return false in this case. So there we go. The error will be gone. All right, so we are done with this method, and we are done with this whole class actually. Now we have a working football team class. All right, so the next step in this problem is to create something called the football team demo to test that class, or to use that class that we just created. So that's going to be another file here. And since it's going to be the driver class, in this case, we expect it to have the main method, right? To make it work and run in this case. So here in this main method of that program, we would like to construct a football team named AITI, all right, with 3 wins and 5 losses. So let's do this. Here we are going to construct our main method. So here we will remove this public, and this is going to be static void main, and in this case it takes string as input and args, and here we have an empty main method. All right, so inside this, what we want to do is to start building a football team named AITI. So how can we do this? Now notice here that you already have a class that defines a football team, and this class is called football team, right? So in this case, from that class you can create objects that represent teams. So here, and the way to do this is to use that constructor. All right, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. That's the structure of this constructor. So I'm going to construct a team using that constructor. So this constructor is going to be built from the football team class. So here is football team class, and I'm going to call that, for the purposes of the reference variable, I'm going to call it AITI, all lowercase, just to distinguish the difference between asking you to name it this and having a reference variable that is named AITI, all lowercase. All right, actually I could call it anything else. I could call it my or first team, for example, or team 1. So that's completely up to you. In this case, this has nothing to do with the requirement of calling the team AITI. Then where does that matter? In this case, it matters here. All right, when you create a new object of the football team class, which I just copied from the football team, that's the constructor. Now all I need to do is to replace these things. So here the string of the name, I'm going to replace it with a string representing the name of the team, which is AITI as instructed here. Number of wins, I'm going to remove this and replace it with the number of initial wins, which is 3. Then the number of losses is going to be 5, so I'm going to replace this to make it 5. And here's my semicolon. So you see here, that is the name of the team defined by that string as I'm asked here. Now, what is this? This is the reference variable, the variable that is going to refer to that object, that football team object, which has the name AITI. It has 3 wins and 5 losses. All right, so I'm going to just replace this. Now you understand the team 1, AITI lowercase, my team, even AITI uppercase if you want to. That's completely up to you. All right, so here I'm just going to call it AITI lowercase to distinguish between the variable and the string. Then the second thing here we are asked to do is to call the method that returns true when the team has a good record and print out the result. So here I'm going to say, okay, system.out.println. In this case, I'm going to say the team standing, or the team has good standing. All right, and this is going to print an answer. So here that's a string, and here I'm going to have the semicolon, and then I'm going to add the method that has or returns the record of the team. Now notice here that, okay, that is the structure of the class. Any football team object that you create from this string, from this class, sorry, it will have its own fields. It will have its own get name, get wins, get losses, wins, increase losses, has good record. Now here what it's asking us is to call the method that returns true and when the team has good record and print out that result. So for what team? Which team would we would like to call its method has good standing or has good record? It's for this team, the AITI, right? So for that object, AITI, I am going to call its copy of the has good record method, right? Next time, for example, I create another team. Let's call it anything, app state. All right. Now, if I create another team, and this is something that is not asked in this problem, but I'm going to do it just to explain. So let's say I'm going to create app state here. All right. And here I'm going to call it app. All right, app state. And then I'm going to say it has 10 wins and 0 losses. All right, we're great. So here in this case, if I would like to call the has good standing or the has good record method, which one should I call it for? So in this case, it has to be for the app state. So now to do this, I will need to replace this with app state. So here, what does that read is that it says for the AITI object, which is referred to using the AITI reference variable, call its own has good record method. All right, the same goes here. For the app state object or the object that is referenced by the app state reference variable, call its has good record copy. So each of these, they have their own has good record. And whenever you call it, it's just going through its corresponding fields, checking that condition, and it's going to return true or false. All right, so let's try this. So here, I'm going to run this, and here, I noticed something very interesting. The team has good standing. The first one, 3 wins, 5 losses, and it's giving me true. And this 10-0 is giving me false. Something is wrong with the logic. This is a logical error because the code is running, the code is compiling, and everything is working properly except for the results are unexpected. So if you go back here, team wins is greater than team losses. If that's the case, then return true, else return false. So something is wrong in this comparison here. So if we look back, here, I think I did a mistake in this case, and the mistake is that when I copied and pasted, I did not notice that team wins is equal to wins. Then I copied that line, I changed wins to losses, but I did not change that. So team wins in both cases are set to the same values, and that's why it's not giving me the correct answer. So here I'm going to change this to be team losses. Now compile, and let's run this here, compile. All right, so that is working now. 3 and 5, that's false, they are not in good standing, and 10-0, that means that the team has good record. All right, so let's get back to the problem. Let's remove this part here, and let's get back to the problem that says call the method that returns. Okay, we did this. Now make 3 calls to the method that increases the number of wins by 1. So we would like to increase the number of wins of the team AITI by 1, and we would like to call that method 3 times. All right, so I can say here, for example, AITI dot and inc wins by 1. So I would like to call this 3 times to increment the wins by 3 wins. All right, so in this case here we did this. Lastly, call the good record method again and print out the result. So what do we expect to happen? We have 3 wins, 5 losses. Then somehow the team AITI came back and they started to or they won 3 times in a row. And in that case, what happens is that their score of wins is going to increase by 3. So this makes it 6 wins, 5 losses. And when we check their record again, it should be a good record, so it should return true. So if we do this here, let's check that output, and that's true. It turned into true. All right. So this example is very nice. It showed us how to create or to develop a complete class, and then how to use this class to create an object, how then to use one of the methods, and then a couple of other methods, and here we get this output.